Welcome back to AI Citizenship for Clinicians. This will be our second lecture in Module 1 of the course, titled The Promise of AI in Medicine. Our first goal for today is to understand how key components of healthcare can be understood as an information processing discipline, which will set us up nicely to see the opportunities for AI in healthcare. Second, we'll overview the primary sources of biomedical data that are leveraged by artificial intelligence systems. And finally, we'll discuss opportunities for AI to increase the quality, efficiency, and access to existing and even some novel healthcare services, research, and education. In our first lecture, we introduced the basic components of modern AI systems using a diagram like this one, demonstrating the flow of information into and out of a machine learning model to generate classifications, predictions, generations, and actions. My core claim for you today is that this description of artificial intelligence lines up extremely closely with nearly everything that we're already doing in healthcare, and that to understand the promise of AI in healthcare is therefore helpful to start by viewing our existing processes and structures through the lens of information processing. This can help expose the opportunities for AI to integrate into our existing workflows. And by the end of next lecture, we're going to extend this argument one step further and argue that not only does understanding healthcare's information flows help us understand the opportunities for AI better, but that effective use of AI in healthcare actually requires a deep understanding of the clinical context. Okay, so let's get started with an extended example. Now, before starting this, I want to emphasize that the specifics of the case are not important, and indeed I'll intentionally be glossing over many of the details. The point of the exercise is to depict the wide breadth of existing healthcare processes that can be understood through this framework that we're developing for AI, not to pick apart the specifics of the case. Our patient's journey begins at home with the onset of crushing chest pain. Ouch. Maybe her alarm on her watch goes off that she's developed an elevated heart rate. What's she going to do? Well, if she's anything like me, particularly before medical school, she's going to take that information and input it into the web. Maybe she'll also message her doctor or call a nurse triage line, or maybe she'll use one of these newfangled tools. Regardless, she's certainly going to be using her own judgment. But one way or another, through the application of these tools to the information that she has, she is going to transform that information into categorizations. This seems like a heart attack. Predictions. She has an appointment on Monday. Probably advisable not to wait that long. Actions. Call 911. And generations. Information needs to be conveyed to providers, to perhaps family members or loved ones, etc. But one way or another, this information about the world has been transformed into predictions, categorizations, and actions that have ultimately landed her in the emergency department. As she enters the emergency department, she starts with the same input information that she has, although additional information is now gathered, such as her vitals. That information is now going to flow through a separate decision-making process by which the triage nurse is going to apply thorough judgment along with internal hospital guidelines and perhaps a computerized decision aid. And ultimately, they will be led to categorizations. What triage level is this going to be? Actions. Identify the appropriate room and trigger the rooming process. Generations. Interim communications that goes through the electronic medical record to the providers that will be taking over the patient's care. As the patient is roomed in the ED, the available information expands through history taking and more comprehensive evaluation. The decision-making processes likewise expand to include the judgment of their providers, including perhaps consult services, more sophisticated care guidelines and computer decision aids, time-permitting literature reviews. But as before, the net effect of all of this is categorizations, admit or don't admit, predictions, risk levels with and without procedures or medications, generations, documentation such as the HPI or the ED note, and actions, many directly clinical, like ordering labs or imaging. Some are more operational in nature, such as triggering the OR prep process if a procedure is to be performed. But yet again, we're seeing a broad collection of processes that line up with the types of tasks that we're describing happening with AI. Now, patients taken to a cath lab procedure, you see where I'm going with this. I'm not going to belabor the point. We've got inputs, we've got processes, and we have categorizations, predictions, generations, and actions. In this case, we're showing in the slide that these principles apply in real-time procedural settings and the like. I'm going to move more quickly through this case as we proceed, but the key point of the next few slides is that not all of the decision making and judgment relevant to clinical care takes place at bedside. For example, so much information from clinical encounters is combined with hospital operations data and is being used by brains and software to flag patients as being high risk for quality improvement programs, to prepare for billing, to make predictions that are used to optimize workflows to enable the treatment of as many patients as possible, to provide communications both for internal reporting as well as real-time communication between staff, and to perform actions that are key to the operation of a hospital. We can similarly consider the immense quantity of decisions, communications, and other information processing tasks that need to take place on an outpatient basis after a patient is discharged from the hospital. And surely we cannot forget the constant and dynamic information exchanges between providers and payers, as well as the internal processes at payer organizations such as insurance companies that need to make reimbursement decisions, perform internal forecasts of healthcare spending for patients and populations, and solicit and process additional information from patients and providers. Finally, research and public health enterprises also primarily consist of information processing tasks, ingesting clinical, environmental, and public data, which are all analyzed to do things like detect side effects from drugs, forecast pandemics, generate reports and synthesize research, communicate to the public, and trigger public health actions. I've probably belabored this example, but the key thing to recognize is that for every single task outlined in the preceding slides, there exists an AI tool designed to support or take on that task. These tools are often fast, cheap, effective, and are only going to become more ubiquitous over the course of our careers. What's more, as we learn to recognize the different types of tasks that AI are able to perform, we can bring this perspective into our clinical practice and identify more and more opportunities for this technology. For the remainder of this lecture, we're going to zoom back out a bit and briefly overview the major data sources and application areas for biomedical AI systems. There's a wide range of possible data sources over which a biomedical AI system may operate, and there's certainly no point in trying to memorize these and no official way to organize them into groups. But just to give a bit of a flavor for the breadth of all these sources, here are 5 categories that I will often think about when considering potential data sources for an AI system. Data may come from clinical records, the sort of thing you could identify in a patient's medical chart, such as labs, meds, diagnoses, or notes and imaging and patient reports. You could have data from non-clinical sources that's still pertinent to a patient's health, such as data acquired through sensors or postings that they make on social media or messages that they send to their medical providers. A great deal of clinical data has to do with healthcare utilization, sources such as insurance claims or Medicare or pharmacy data. Similarly, there's a wide range of public health data sources. These can include environmental data or data curated by patient groups or government efforts such as biobanks. Finally, there's a broad range of research and educational data such as textbooks and research articles. With all of the above, and especially if you're participating in some sort of analysis or the design of an AI system, it can also be helpful to distinguish between structured data and unstructured data. Structured data is the sort of data that you could fit in a table or perhaps select from a drop-down menu. It can include binary data like alive or deceased, laboratory tests, medications, or the like. In contrast, unstructured data includes things like text, images, videos, and other sorts of free-form data that don't come with pre-specified options. Similarly, there's a very wide range of potential tasks that AI systems can be designed to solve. Here I provide some characteristic examples that have been grouped by their settings of use and their target end users. Patient-facing AI tools may include tools designed to improve healthcare literacy, for example, bringing explanations of medical content or translations into patients' native languages. Other patient-facing AI tools may support patients in making quicker diagnoses or treatment decisions. Finally, a great opportunity exists for AI tools to facilitate care coordination, such as providing medication reminders or coordinating amongst specialties and improving communication with providers. A great deal of our future lectures in this and other modules will be focused on clinician-facing applications of AI. These can include resources for chart summarization, clinical reasoning such as diagnosis and management, patient triaging, and patient communication. Other applications of clinical artificial intelligence can be involved in operations, such as services to optimize workflow or improve the quality of care within hospital organizations, and tools used by payer organizations governing reimbursement. These can include tools for treatment authorization decisions, or risk assessment or network management. Beyond clinical practice, AI has many applications throughout biomedical research. Now, biomedical research can, of course, include everything from basic science and drug discovery efforts up through preclinical research that seeks to study potential drugs and devices in a laboratory setting, to clinical research such as clinical trials, safety monitoring research conducted by government and private entities, other public health efforts such as those that try to study relationships between the environment and health, and science communication and outreach efforts that try to make scientific findings and results more understandable by the public. While the details of AI for science are largely outside the scope of this lecture series, AI has catalyzed several major breakthroughs in scientific problems such as protein modeling and drug development, and is showing great promise for many additional areas on this chart. Another area that's very exciting for many of us involved in this course are the opportunities that AI, and in particular generative AI, offer in clinical education. All of us as learners are familiar with the wide range of tools that are used during teaching and assessment of clinical and other forms of education, and you've likely noticed that there's often a trade-off between how personalized the resources are and how easy the resources are to distribute. And what we've depicted in the chart here is that trade-off. For example, textbooks and written exams are very easy to copy and distribute to as many learners as you would want, but they're extremely rigid and not personalized. On the other hand, resources like private tutors or individualized coaches can provide extremely personalized and helpful feedback for learners, but are not inherently something that can scale up easily to an entire population of students. Our hope, and I recognize that this is somewhat speculative, is that AI may offer the opportunity to develop personalized and highly distributable resources, namely personalized interactive AI tutors that can adapt to learners' needs, provide individualized feedback, and be focused on the types of measurements and outcomes that we care about most. Finally, we can't finish this lecture without acknowledging that with easily distributable AI systems, clinical reasoning engines, even if they aren't designed to be such, are already being distributed to the public at scale. This is extremely exciting, but could also be potentially dangerous. As you see in these headlines, on the one hand, there have been patients that have already reached diagnoses for themselves or their loved ones through the use of AI tools that weren't available even a few years ago. On the other hand, these tools, which have generally not been optimized or studied for clinical use cases, may make mistakes and place patients at risk if they are followed clinically. As with the rest of clinical AI, there is indeed a lot to be excited about and a lot that merits careful consideration of potential safeguards. And on that note, we've reached the end of this lecture. In our next session, we will begin our discussion of the pitfalls of AI in medicine, which will round out our general AI lectures and tee us up to discuss large language models in more depth.